The Associate Justice Minister, Nicole McKee, was a guest on Q&A yesterday morning on the One News website. Later it read, Firearms Minister grilled on government's reforms, and her record, what it should have said, was Jack Tame's egregious interview that accuses the Minister of the Christchurch massacre. Referring to Minister McKee as a gun lobbyist continually and refusing to be corrected on the difference between firearms and magazines. But what was most appalling was not once, twice or three times, but four times. Tame worded his questions that alluded to the heinous crime committed by Brenton Tarrant was somehow the minister's fault. I reached out to Minister Nicole McKee. As you guys know, I've had her on the show many a time. I believe in allowing the person to answer questions without being railroaded or accused of something as odious as what happened in Christchurch, because those accusations can lead to someone believing that. So to let the minister finish her questions and explain a few issues, please welcome Associate Justice Minister Nicole McKee. Nicole, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Leah. Thank you for the opportunity to have a grown-up discussion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand. You know, my mother used to say you're mature enough to handle the situation, but I believe that, and you did, you handled yourself with decorum. But yesterday felt like an ambush, and did it shock you the continued references to the Christchurch massacre and your supposed involvement?
Yes, it did. And, I was really disappointed in that line that was taken and how it's been continuously used over the last week. If you look at my background and my records, it's all, even my qualifications, it's all in firearms safety. And I think, if anything, if the government of the day had listened to the constant requests that I had been making since 2012 to ensure that large capacity magazines were restricted to ownership only by those that had the correct endorsements, then maybe we wouldn't have had the March 15 event either. But at the end of the day, it's not my fault, and it wasn't the government of the day's fault. It was one individual who got a firearms licence, took advantage of a loophole, and the fact that the loophole was eventually changed, it could have happened earlier, and I'd been lobbying for that since 2012. So a disappointing way that some commentators are leading the discussion on the firearms debate, because ultimately it's a discussion we should be having as a country on how we make New Zealand safer with firearms in it.
Can we look at some of the issues that Jack Tame was struggling with? You were a spokesperson for COLFO, the Council of Licensed Firearms Owners, correct?
Not at the time that the 2016-2017 inquiry was underway. I became the spokesperson for the Council of Licensed Firearm Owners in 2019.
Right.
What he was talking about actually occurred in 2016-17, and at that time I was actually a contractor to New Zealand Police delivering firearm safety education and licensing opportunities in rural and remote areas.
Because it was intimated that you were there as a gun lobbyist, which you've just explained you weren't. You were there as a contractor for safety for the police, correct?
Well, I wasn't actually brought in by the then Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, even in that respect. I was asked to be her advisor, one of two advisors, and she wanted somebody that did have firearms knowledge and extensive firearms knowledge. And what I was told by her at the time was every time she went to a group of people and said, who shall I get, they kept saying my name. So she eventually said, somebody go get me Nicole McKee, because she keeps popping up. So it had nothing to do with lobbying or the fact that I was contracting to New Zealand Police. I think it was more word of mouth from a whole different lot of people who thought that I could help the minister then understand what was important with firearms use, and that is safety around firearms.
So what was this loophole, Nicole, that you was speaking about yesterday? This was part of the 2017 Select Committee into Gun Laws, correct?
Correct. So back in 2016, an inquiry was underway as to the illegal possession of firearms by people and what that would do and how we could mitigate that. At the time, there were, if I remember correctly, about 20 recommendations that were made, and a few of them were rejected because they were actually out of scope of what the inquiry was about, and that's purely why they were rejected, not by me, but by the minister at the time. The loophole that we talk about, and this is where I think Jack got confused, he was talking about firearms. I'm talking about the magazines, the high-capacity magazines. And what it was before, since 2012 or even before then, anyone could have gone into a gun shop and purchased a large-capacity magazine, and you didn't even need a firearms licence for it. You could have just gone in there and said, I want to buy one of these, and they would have been sold to you. What we wanted was the ability for only those that had the E-endorsement or military-style semi-automatic endorsement, so they've already gone through extra processing, extra security, extra fit and proper checks, only they should have been able to purchase those magazines. And that loophole was never closed. And in fact, on March the 14th, 2019, the day before the mosque shooting, it was brought up again to New Zealand Police that this was actually quite important. We didn't think there was going to be a mass shooting. We actually thought somebody could purchase this and inadvertently put it into a standard firearm, changing its status. Police told us the horses bolted. It was too late. They couldn't do anything. Within 24 hours, things started to change, and it's so unfortunate that 51 people had to lose their lives for the 7 years of advocacy that I was trying to get change in.
So you were for those 7 years campaigning against, you wanted to restrict these high capacity magazines, these large capacity magazines. That's what you were trying to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I've been asking for that for 7 years and got told it couldn't happen.
And like you said, this is different between the confusion between firearms and magazines.
Yes. And so what Jack was talking about was the requirement to restrict certain types of semi-automatics.
The MSSAs.
Yes, the MSSAs. Now, we already had a restriction on the MSSAs. And in fact, even after March 15 and the rough legislative changes that occurred, they've actually gone on and created a whole lot of bureaucracy around the different types of firearms, but it's not made anyone safer. We've still got a proliferation of firearms by the criminal fraternity. We still have large amounts of firearms crime. So actually what Jack was talking about hasn't made a difference to safety even after it's been implemented post 2019 and 2020. The actual issue was about the large capacity magazines, because that's what Brenton Tarrant had to change the configuration of his firearm and commit that heinous crime.